In the heart of downtown Manhattan, there was a buzzing tech company called Harper & Co. Known for its cutting-edge AI solutions, the company had been struggling to stay ahead in a competitive market. To turn things around, they hired a new CEO, a talented and innovative leader who happened to be one of the few black executives in Silicon Alley. But this story doesn't start with him. It starts at the front desk. At the reception area sat Claire, a no-nonsense woman in her mid-30s. She'd worked as a receptionist for years and took pride in keeping everything running smoothly. Whether it was managing calls, greeting visitors, or making sure people followed the rules, Claire ran her domain like a well-oiled machine. People often joked that if you wanted to get into Harper & Co., you first had to pass Claire's inspection. And while she wasn't the boss, she carried herself like someone who knew how important her role was. One morning, just like any other, Claire was busy typing away on her computer when the glass doors swung open. A man walked in wearing sneakers, jeans, and a blazer. He looked relaxed, almost too casual for the polished offices of Harper & Co. Without looking up from her screen, Claire assumed he was either a delivery guy or maybe an intern. After all, nobody important dressed like that, right? Sorry, she said curtly, still focused on her phone. We don't allow solicitors here. The man paused for a moment, clearly surprised by her tone. Then, without arguing, he stepped aside and waited quietly near the elevators. Claire didn't think much of it. People came and went every day, and most weren't worth remembering. Little did she know, this particular visitor was about to change everything. Later that same morning, Richard, the company's COO, strode into the lobby. Spotting the man by the elevators, his face lit up with a wide grin. "Hey, welcome back," he exclaimed, walking over to shake hands enthusiastically. "Everyone's been waiting for you." Claire froze. Her eyes darted between Richard and the man in sneakers. That's when it hit her. The person she'd dismissed so rudely was none other than the new CEO. The very person everyone had been talking about for weeks. Heat rushed to her cheeks as embarrassment washed over her. How could she have made such a huge mistake? But instead of calling her out, the CEO simply smiled politely and thanked Richard for the warm welcome. There was no anger in his expression, no hint of frustration. If anything, he seemed unfazed, like this kind of thing happened to him all the time. Still, Claire couldn't shake off the feeling of shame gnawing at her insides. Over lunch, Claire vented to her co-workers about what had happened. "Can you believe it?" she said, stirring her salad absent-mindedly. "He shows up looking like, I don't know, some guy off the street and expects us to treat him like royalty? Where's the professionalism?" Her words spread quickly through the office, sparking murmurs of agreement among some employees. Others rolled their eyes, thinking Claire was overreacting. But whether people agreed with her or not, the incident planted a seed of doubt in many minds. Who exactly was this new CEO? Was he really qualified to lead the company? Or was he just another flashy hire meant to impress investors? Meanwhile, the CEO settled into his new role, completely unaware of the whispers circulating behind closed doors. Focused on turning Harper & Co. around, he spent long hours reviewing reports, meeting with teams, and brainstorming ideas to bring the company back to life. His laid-back style might have caught Claire off guard, but it also inspired those who worked closely with him. They admired his vision and dedication, even if they didn't always understand his methods. As days turned into weeks, Claire found herself watching the CEO more closely. Every time he walked past her desk, she felt a pang of guilt mixed with irritation. Why did he have to dress like that? Why couldn't he act more like the leaders she was used to seeing? Deep down, though, she knew her reaction wasn't entirely fair. Maybe it wasn't about his clothes or attitude, it was about something else entirely, something she wasn't ready to admit yet. Little did anyone know this single moment of misjudgment would set off a chain of events that would rock Harper & Co. to its core. The awkward encounter in the lobby didn't just fade away like Claire had hoped. Instead, it lingered in the air, creating a strange tension that neither she nor the new CEO seemed able to shake off. For Claire, every time he walked past her desk, she felt a mix of guilt and frustration bubbling inside her. She couldn't help but notice how casually he carried himself, how he greeted everyone with a warm smile, even people who barely acknowledged him back. It was as if he didn't care about formalities or appearances, which only fueled her irritation further. But it wasn't just Claire who was paying attention. Word of the lobby incident spread quickly through the office grapevine. Some employees found it amusing, a funny little story to share over coffee. Others saw it as proof that the new CEO wasn't cut out for the role. If he can't even dress properly, they whispered, how's he going to handle running this company? These murmurs reached the ears of Richard, the COO, who tried to brush them off. He knew better than anyone how capable the new leader was. Still, he couldn't ignore the growing unease among the staff. People were uncomfortable with change, especially when it came from someone so different from what they were used to. And while Richard admired the CEO's calm demeanor, he also worried that his relaxed style might not sit well with everyone. Claire, however, took things a step further. She began documenting every interaction she had with the CEO, no matter how small or insignificant. One day he stopped by her desk to ask where the conference room was. Another time he thanked her for holding the door open for him. Each of these moments went into a mental folder labeled unprofessional behavior. To Claire, they were evidence that the CEO didn't take his job seriously enough, and she wasn't shy about sharing her thoughts. During lunch breaks, she'd pull aside her closest coworkers and recount these incidents, spinning them into examples of why the CEO wasn't fit for the top job. Did you see him yesterday? She'd say, lowering her voice conspiratorially. He walked into a meeting 10 minutes late wearing the same sneakers he wore on his first day. Can you believe that? What kind of message does that send to the team? Her comments struck a chord with some employees, particularly those who were resistant to change. They nodded along, agreeing that the CEO's approach felt too casual, too unfamiliar. Others, though, rolled their eyes at Claire's complaints. Maybe he just has a different way of doing things, one colleague suggested half-heartedly. But Claire wasn't convinced. In her mind, there was a clear line between professionalism and recklessness, and the CEO was crossing it every single day. What Claire didn't realize was that her words were starting to shape how others viewed the CEO. Her criticisms, repeated often enough, planted seeds of doubt in people's minds. Even employees who initially supported him began to question whether he was truly the right person to lead Harper & Co. Through no fault of his own, the CEO was slowly becoming a target of suspicion and skepticism, all because of a few careless remarks made by someone who barely interacted with him. Meanwhile, the CEO remained oblivious to the storm brewing around him. Focused on turning the company around, he worked tirelessly, pouring hours into strategy sessions, client meetings, and brainstorming sessions with his team. He noticed the occasional side-eye glance or hushed conversation, but chalked it up to normal workplace dynamics. After all, stepping into a leadership role always came with its challenges. What he didn't know was that this challenge was far bigger than he imagined. One afternoon, as Claire sat at her desk scrolling through emails, she overheard snippets of a private conversation between the CEO and Emily, the CFO. They were discussing plans to restructure the company, a move aimed at cutting costs and improving efficiency. The details were vague, but one thing stood out. Certain non-essential roles, including receptionists, might be eliminated. Claire's heart sank. She stared at her computer screen, trying to process what she'd heard. Losing her job wasn't something she could afford. Not now. Not ever. Panic set in, and with it came anger. How dare they consider letting her go after everything she'd done for this company? Didn't they realize how important her role was? That evening, as she lay awake in bed replaying the conversation in her head, an idea began to form. If the CEO thought he could waltz in here, dressed like a regular guy, and dismantle the company without consequences, then maybe it was time someone showed him otherwise. Claire grabbed her laptop and started typing. By the time she hit send, she had no idea how far-reaching the effects of her actions would be, or how much damage they would cause. The email Claire sent late that night was like a spark thrown onto dry grass. It spread faster than she could have imagined. By morning, the entire office was buzzing with whispers and shocked expressions. The subject line of the email said it all. The truth about our new CEO. In bold letters, it accused the new leader of incompetence, favoritism, and even financial misconduct. None of the claims were backed by evidence, but that didn't matter. Once the email landed in everyone's inbox, it became the talk of the building. At first, Claire felt a strange mix of satisfaction and unease. She told herself this was justified. After all, hadn't the CEO dismissed people like her as unimportant? Hadn't he come in with his sneakers and blazer, acting like rules didn't apply to him? And now, wasn't he planning to cut jobs without considering the impact on hard-working employees? Sitting at her desk, watching colleagues huddle together, in quiet, urgent conversations, she convinced herself she'd done the right thing. But deep down, a tiny voice nagged at her. Was this really fair? For the CEO, the fallout hit hard and fast. As soon as he arrived at the office, he could feel the shift in the atmosphere. People avoided eye contact. Conversations stopped when he entered a room. Even Richard, usually so supportive, seemed distant. At first, he chalked it up to stress or maybe rumors about the restructuring plans. But then, during a meeting with senior management, one of the executives hesitantly mentioned the email. "You've seen it, right?" the executive asked cautiously, glancing around the table. "It's everywhere." The CEO frowned, confused. "Seen what?" Someone slid a printed copy of the email across the table. As he read through the accusations, his stomach sank. Every word was baseless, yet written with such certainty that it sounded convincing, even damning. He looked up at the group, searching for reassurance, but found only awkward silence. For the first time since taking the job, he felt truly isolated. Word of the email didn't stay confined to the office for long. Within hours, screenshots began circulating online. Former employees joined the conversation, sharing their own grievances. Some, legitimate, others exaggerated. Reporters picked up the story, eager to dig into the drama surrounding Harper & Co.'s leadership. What started as an internal issue quickly spiraled into a full-blown public scandal. Investors panicked. Calls poured into the boardroom demanding explanations. Clients who had trusted the company with major projects started questioning whether they should continue their partnerships. Employees, already uneasy about the restructuring plans, grew restless. Some updated their resumes and started looking for jobs elsewhere, fearing the worst. Morale plummeted and productivity ground to a halt. Amidst the chaos, Claire watched from her desk, torn between guilt and defiance. On one hand, she couldn't deny the damage her email had caused. Layoffs hadn't even been officially announced, yet, but the uncertainty was already driving people out the door. Friends and co-workers she'd chatted with daily now avoided her, sensing her involvement somehow. The lively hum of the office had been replaced by tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. On the other hand, part of Claire still believed she was right. If nothing else, her email had exposed cracks in the foundation of Harper & Co., cracks the CEO refused to acknowledge. Didn't he deserve to face some accountability? Didn't everyone? But as days turned into weeks, the reality of the situation began sinking in. The company's stock price plummeted. Key deals fell through. Teams that had once collaborated seamlessly now worked in silos, distrustful of each other and of leadership. Worst of all, the layoffs Claire feared became inevitable. Not because of the restructuring plan, but because the company was hemorrhaging money trying to recover from the scandal. One evening, as Claire packed up her things to leave, she overheard two co-workers talking near the water cooler. Their voices were low, but their words cut through her like knives. "I heard it was someone inside the company who sent that email," one of them said. "Can you believe anyone would do something like that?" The others shook their head. "Whoever it was, they destroyed this place. We're never going to recover from this." Claire froze, her bag halfway zipped. Destroyed. That word echoed in her mind long after she left the office. Had she really gone too far? That night, lying awake in bed, she replayed the events in her head. She thought about the CEO, the way he'd smiled politely despite being underestimated, The way he worked late nights trying to save a company that clearly didn't trust him. She thought about her coworkers, packing up their desks and saying tearful goodbyes. And she thought about herself, about how her fear of losing control had led her to lash out in the worst possible way. By the time dawn broke, Claire knew she couldn't undo what she'd done. But she also realized something else. If she wanted any chance of redemption, she'd have to take responsibility for her actions. Whether the company survived or crumbled, the weight of its destruction rested squarely on her shoulders, and no amount of justification could change that. The weight of what she'd done pressed down on Claire like a ton of bricks. For days, she went through the motions at work, answering phones, sorting mail, smiling politely when necessary, but her mind was elsewhere. Every glance from a coworker felt like an accusation. Every conversation she overheard seemed to revolve around the chaos that had engulfed Harper & Co., and she couldn't shake the feeling that everyone somehow knew it was her fault. Meanwhile, the CEO found himself in the fight of his life. The scandal had painted him as someone untrustworthy, incompetent, and out of touch. Investors were pulling out left and right, clients were reconsidering contracts, and morale among employees had hit rock bottom. Yet despite the mounting pressure, he refused to back down. He called an emergency meeting with the board to address the situation head-on. "I didn't come here to fail," he said firmly, standing at the front of the conference room. His voice carried a mix of exhaustion and determination. "If people think I'm unfit for this role, then let's prove them wrong. We'll get to the bottom of this email, clear my name, and show everyone why I was brought here, to turn this company around." His words resonated with some members of the board, but others weren't convinced. One executive leaned forward, his tone sharp. "This isn't just about your reputation anymore. It's about the future of this company. If we don't act quickly, we're looking at bankruptcy." The gravity of the situation hung heavy in the air. After hours of heated debate, they agreed on one thing. Finding the source of the email was their top priority. They hired a crisis management firm to investigate who had sent it and why. What they uncovered would change everything. Claire hadn't expected things to escalate so quickly. When two representatives from the crisis management team showed up at her desk one afternoon, her heart skipped a beat. They introduced themselves politely, asking if they could speak with her in private. Her palms grew sweaty as she followed them into a small meeting room. "Ms. Bennett," one of them began, placing a folder on the table. "We've traced the origin of the anonymous email to a device registered under your name." Claire's stomach dropped. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. The investigator slid a document across the table. It was a detailed report showing timestamps, IP addresses, and other technical evidence linking the email directly to her personal laptop. "There's no doubt about it," the second investigator added gently. "This came from you." For a moment, Claire considered denying it. Maybe there had been a mistake. Maybe someone had hacked her computer. But as she stared at the damning proof in front of her, she realized there was no way out. The truth was staring her in the face, and lying would only make things worse. Tears welled up in her eyes as she nodded slowly. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It was me." Later that day, the CEO met with Claire in a private office. There were no cameras, no lawyers, just the two of them sitting across from each other. He looked at her calmly, his expression unreadable. Claire braced herself for anger, maybe even yelling, but instead, he simply asked, "Why?" Her throat tightened. She wanted to explain how scared she'd been about losing her job, how frustrated she'd felt watching him breeze into the company without following what she saw as basic rules of professionalism. But none of those excuses felt good enough now. I thought I was protecting myself," she stammered finally. "I heard rumors about layoffs and I panicked. I never meant for it to blow up like this." The CEO listened quietly, letting her words hang in the air. When she finished, he sighed deeply. "Look, I understand fear," he said, his tone measured. "But what you did wasn't just reckless. It hurt a lot of people. Good people. People who believed in this company and worked hard to keep it running." Claire nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know," she choked out. "And I'm so sorry." He studied her for a moment, then leaned back in his chair. "Here's what's going to happen. You have two choices. You can resign quietly, or we can terminate your employment and pursue legal action. Either way, this ends today." Claire's breath caught in her throat. Legal action? The thought terrified her. She glanced at the floor, her mind racing. Finally, she looked up and whispered, "I'll resign." As Claire packed up her desk later that evening, memories flooded back. The days following Claire's resignation were far from smooth sailing for Harper & Co. The damage had already been done, and the cracks in the foundation of the company were deeper than anyone had anticipated. Employees who had once prided themselves on being part of a thriving, innovative workplace now walked around with their shoulders slumped, whispering anxiously about what would happen next. Some packed up their desks quietly, knowing layoffs were inevitable. Others updated their resumes, during lunch breaks preparing for the worst. For the CEO, every morning felt like stepping onto a battlefield. He arrived early and left late, determined to hold the pieces together. But it wasn't just the financial losses or the dwindling client list that weighed on him. It was the loss of trust. People doubted his leadership, questioned his decisions, and second-guessed his vision for the company. Even those who still supported him seemed hesitant to speak up, afraid of rocking the boat further. One afternoon, as he sat in his office reviewing yet another round of bad news, there was a knock at the door. It was Emily, the CFO, holding a folder thick with documents. Her face was pale, her usual confidence replaced by obvious worry. "We've got a problem," she said, sitting down across from him. "The board wants to suspend you until this blows over." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Suspend him? After everything he'd done to try and save the company? He stared at her, searching for any sign that she might be joking. But Emily's expression told him she was dead serious. "They think it'll calm things down," she continued softly. "Buy us some time to rebuild investor confidence." He leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his face. For a moment he considered giving in, letting them sideline him while they figured out how to fix the mess. But then he thought about all the late nights, all the sacrifices he'd made to get here. This company wasn't just a job. It was a chance to prove that innovation and integrity could go hand in hand. Giving up now would mean letting fear win, and he couldn't let that happen. "Tell them no," he said firmly, looking Emily straight in the eye. "If they want me gone, they'll have to fire me, because I'm not walking away." Emily hesitated, clearly torn between loyalty to him and the pressure from the board. Finally, she nodded. "All right, but you need to show them something, anything that proves we're moving in the right direction." That night, the CEO stayed late in the office, brainstorming ways to turn the tide. He knew he couldn't undo the past, but maybe he could start rebuilding trust, one step at a time. By morning, he had a plan. The first thing he did was call an all-hands meeting. When employees filed into the conference room, many looked skeptical, expecting more bad news. Instead, he stood at the front of the room, unflinching. "I know you're angry," he began, his voice steady. "I know you feel betrayed, uncertain and scared. And honestly, you have every right to feel that way. What happened here wasn't fair to any of you." A murmur rippled through the crowd. No one had expected him to admit fault so openly. "But I'm not going anywhere," he continued. "This company is worth fighting for, and so are all of you. So, starting today, I'm opening the floor. If you have concerns, frustrations, or ideas, I want to hear them. No filters, no judgment. Let's figure this out together." The room fell silent. Then, slowly, someone raised their hand. A young developer spoke up, voicing worries about the restructuring plans. Another employee chimed in, sharing how the scandal had affected their ability to focus on projects. One by one, people began opening up, airing grievances they'd kept bottled up for weeks. It wasn't easy listening to criticism, especially when some comments cut deep. But the CEO took it all in stride, nodding and taking notes. When the meeting ended, Several employees approached him privately, thanking him for listening. For the first time in months, there was a glimmer of hope in the air. In the weeks that followed, the CEO kept his promise. He launched weekly town hall meetings where employees could voice their thoughts without fear of backlash. He also introduced mentorship programs designed to support underrepresented groups within the company, ensuring that everyone felt valued and heard. Slowly but surely, the toxic atmosphere began to lift. Investors noticed the shift too. At first, they remained cautious, watching closely to see if the changes stuck. But when the CEO presented a clear roadmap for recovery, complete GRPAs, the weeks turned into months. The CEO's efforts to rebuild Harper & Co. started showing signs of progress. The weekly town hall meetings became a cornerstone of the company's new culture. Employees who had once been hesitant to speak up now eagerly shared their ideas and concerns. Some brought forward innovative solutions to improve workflows, while others voiced honest feedback about challenges they faced in their roles. What surprised everyone, even the CEO, was how much untapped potential existed within the team. By simply giving people a platform to be heard, he unlocked a wave of creativity and collaboration that hadn't been there before. One particular meeting stood out. A junior analyst named Rachel, who had always kept to herself, raised her hand timidly. When the CEO called on her, she took a deep breath and said, "I think we're focusing too much on fixing what went wrong, and not enough on what makes us unique. Our AI tools are still ahead of the curve. If we lean into that, we can win back trust." Her comment sparked a lively discussion. Other employees chimed in, building on her idea. By the end of the meeting, they had outlined a bold campaign to rebrand Harper & Co. as a leader in ethical AI development, a move that would set them apart from competitors and align with growing consumer demand for transparency. It was a turning point, not just for the company but for Rachel too. For the first time, she felt like her voice mattered. The CEO also made it a priority to address the internal divisions that had festered during the scandal. He noticed cliques forming, groups of employees sticking tightly together, wary of outsiders. To break down these barriers, he organized team-building workshops and cross-departmental projects. At first, some people resisted, grumbling about wasted time or unnecessary activities. But as the sessions progressed, something remarkable happened. Walls began to crumble. During one workshop, a marketing specialist found herself paired with an engineer to solve a hypothetical problem. They came from completely different worlds, one focused on storytelling, the other on data. But by the end of the exercise, they realized how complementary their skills were. That partnership eventually led to a groundbreaking product feature that impressed clients and reignited interest in Harper & Co.'s offerings. These small victories added up. Morale improved. People started smiling again. The office, which had once felt like a ghost town, regained its energy. Even longtime skeptics admitted that things were moving in the right direction. Meanwhile, outside the company, the tide was beginning to turn as well. Investors who had initially pulled out began reconsidering their decisions after seeing the tangible steps Harper & Co. was taking to recover. The CEO personally reached out to key stakeholders, inviting them to tour the office and meet the team. During these visits, he didn't sugarcoat the struggles they'd faced. Instead, he highlighted the lessons learned and the measures put in place to prevent similar crises in the future. "We messed up," he told one group of investors candidly. "But we're stronger because of it. And I believe we're building something that will last, not just for us but for the industry as a whole." His honesty resonated. Slowly but surely, funding started flowing back in. Clients who had paused contracts renewed their partnerships, encouraged by the company's renewed focus on innovation and ethics. By the end of the fiscal year, Harper & Co.'s wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. For Claire, life after Harper & Co. was a stark contrast to the bustling environment she'd left behind. After resigning, she struggled to find another corporate job. Her reputation preceded her, and interviews often ended abruptly when potential employers dug into her past. Rejection after rejection left her feeling defeated and unsure of where to go next. Eventually, She landed a position at a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping unemployed workers transition into new careers. It wasn't glamorous, and the pay was significantly lower, but it gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't expected. Working with people who were struggling to rebuild their lives reminded her of her own journey, and how easy it was to make mistakes when fear clouded judgment. One day, while leading a workshop on workplace ethics, Claire found herself recounting the story of what had happened at Harper & Co. She didn't name names or try to justify her actions. Instead, she used her experience as a cautionary tale. "I let my insecurities get the better of me," she admitted to the group. "And because of that, I hurt a lot of good people. Don't make the same mistake I did. Speak up when you're scared, sure, but do it the right way. Because trust, once broken, is incredibly hard to fix." Her words struck a chord with the attendees, many of whom approached her afterward to thank her for being so open. For the first time since leaving Harper & Co., Claire felt like she was contributing something meaningful. She couldn't undo the damage she'd caused, but maybe, just maybe, she could help others avoid making the same errors. Back at Harper & Co., as the CEO reflected on everything that had transpired. By the time the second year rolled around, Harper & Co. had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. The company wasn't just back on its feet, it was thriving in ways that made industry experts take notice. Their rebranding campaign, built around ethical AI development, struck a chord with both clients and consumers. People wanted to work with a company that prioritized transparency and innovation over profit margins, and Harper & Co. delivered exactly that. The CEO played a big role in this turnaround, but he was quick to credit the team. He often said in interviews, "This isn't my success, it's ours," and he meant it. Every decision, every strategy, every late-night brainstorming session was driven by collaboration. Employees who had once felt like cogs in a machine now saw themselves as vital parts of something bigger. They weren't just working for a paycheck, they were building a legacy. One of the most visible changes was the shift in leadership style. Gone were the days of top-down directives and rigid hierarchies. Instead, the CEO encouraged open dialogue at every level. Managers held regular check-ins with their teams, not just to discuss projects, but to ask how people were doing personally. Mental health days became normalized, and flexible work arrangements helped employees balance their personal and professional lives. These small gestures went a long way in fostering loyalty and trust. Even the office space reflected the new culture. Walls were torn down, literally, to create more open, collaborative areas. Conference rooms were renamed after core values like trust, innovation, and resilience. The lobby, once dominated by Claire's imposing desk, now featured a sleek self-service kiosk and a welcoming lounge area where visitors could relax. It was symbolic of how far the company had come, from gatekeeping to openness. But success didn't mean forgetting the past. The CEO made sure the lessons from the scandal remained fresh in everyone's minds. During orientation sessions, for new hires, he shared the story of what had happened, not to shame anyone, but to emphasize the importance of integrity and communication. "We messed up," he'd say plainly, "and we paid the price. But we learned, and we grew. That's what resilience is all about." He also introduced initiatives to ensure such a crisis wouldn't happen again. Anonymous feedback channels allowed employees to voice concerns without fear of retaliation. Regular diversity training workshops helped break down biases and foster inclusivity, and a mentorship program paired seasoned employees with newcomers, creating bonds across generations and departments. These efforts didn't just improve morale, they attracted top talent. People wanted to be part of a company that valued them as individuals, not just as workers. Applications flooded in, and Harper & Co. became known as an employer of choice in the tech world. For Claire, life had taken a completely different turn. Her work at the nonprofit gave her a sense of fulfillment she hadn't found in years. She spent her days helping people navigate career transitions, teaching them skills like resume writing, interview preparation, and workplace etiquette. At first, she kept her own story hidden, fearing judgment. But over time, she realized her experience could serve as a powerful teaching tool. One afternoon, during a seminar on professionalism, she decided to share her side of the story. "I used to think being professional meant following rules and keeping order," she told the group. "But I learned the hard way that true professionalism is about respect, for others, for yourself, and for the impact your actions can have." Her honesty resonated deeply with the attendees. Many approached her afterward, sharing their own struggles with fear and insecurity in the workplace. Claire listened patiently, offering advice and encouragement. For the first time in years, she felt like she was making a real difference, not just in her own life, but in the lives of others. Still, there were moments when guilt crept in. Late at night, lying awake, she wondered if the people she'd hurt at Harper & Co. had forgiven her. Did they remember her fondly, or did they still see her as the woman who nearly destroyed everything? She couldn't change the past, but she hoped her current work would somehow make amends. Back at Harper & Co., the CEO occasionally thought about Claire too. Not with anger, but with curiosity. Where was she now? Was she happy? He never tried to reach out. He knew closure wasn't always necessary, but he hoped she'd found peace. After all, the scandal had taught him that everyone makes mistakes. What mattered was learning from them and moving forward. On the 3rd anniversary of his appointment, the CEO stood at the front of the office during a celebratory gathering. Balloons floated near the ceiling, snacks lined the tables, and laughter filled the air. Looking out at the crowd, he felt a swell of pride. This wasn't just a company anymore. It was a community. 3 years ago, he began, raising his glass. "We've faced one of the toughest challenges this company has ever seen. But look at us now. We didn't just survive, we thrived. And we did it together." The room erupted in applause. Employees cheered, hugged, and snapped photos to commemorate the moment. As the celebration continued, the CEO stepped aside, letting others take center stage. Watching his team laugh and celebrate, he realized something profound. Harper & Co.'s greatest strength wasn't its technology or its profits, it was its people. And as long as they stayed united, nothing could stop them. Years later, when asked about the scandal in interviews, the CEO always framed it as a turning point, a painful yet transformative chapter in the company's history. "We came close to losing everything," he'd admit. "But sometimes you need to fall apart to rebuild stronger. And that's exactly what we did." As for Claire, she eventually moved on from the nonprofit to start her own consulting business, focusing on workplace ethics and conflict resolution. Her journey wasn't easy, but it taught her the value of accountability and growth. Though she and the CEO never crossed paths again, their stories remained intertwined, a reminder that even the hardest lessons can lead to meaningful change. Years passed, and Harper & Co. continued to grow into a powerhouse in the tech industry. The company's focus on ethical AI development set it apart from competitors, earning it awards and recognition worldwide. Its products became synonymous with innovation and trust, qualities that attracted not only clients but also top talent, eager to join a workplace where they felt valued and respected. What started as a crisis had transformed into an opportunity, a chance to redefine what success truly meant. The CEO often reflected on how far they'd come. He remembered the sleepless nights, the heated board meetings, and the days when it felt like everything was falling apart. But he also remembered the moments of hope. The first town hall meeting where employees finally opened up, the day a junior analyst suggested rebranding the company, and the moment investors began returning with renewed confidence. Each step had been hard-won, but together, they'd built something extraordinary. One evening, after wrapping up a particularly long day, the CEO found himself standing by the window of his office, gazing out at the city skyline. It was quiet now, the hum of activity replaced by the soft glow of desk lamps left on by employees working late. He thought about all the people who had played a part in this journey, the ones who stayed loyal despite the chaos, the ones who pushed back constructively, and even the ones who walked away. Every single person had left their mark, shaping the company into what it was today. He also thought about Claire. Though she hadn't been part of Harper & Co.'s resurgence, her actions had sparked a chain reaction that forced everyone to confront uncomfortable truths. Her email may have caused destruction, but it also exposed weaknesses in the company's culture, weaknesses that needed addressing if Harper & Comer was going to survive. In a strange way, he owed her a debt of gratitude. Without that crisis, he might never have realized how fragile trust could be or how vital it was to nurture it. Meanwhile, Claire's life had taken a path she never could have imagined. After leaving Harper & Cohen, she struggled for months, grappling with guilt and regret. But her work at the nonprofit gave her purpose, showing her that mistakes didn't have to define her. Helping others navigate their careers reminded her of her own missteps and taught her the importance of resilience and accountability. Eventually, Claire decided to take a leap of faith. She founded her own consulting firm, focusing on workplace ethics and conflict resolution. Drawing from her experiences, she developed workshops designed to help companies create healthier, more inclusive environments. Her seminars were raw and honest, filled with stories of failure and redemption. People connected with her authenticity, and soon her business gained traction. One day, while preparing for a workshop, Claire received an email from a former colleague. At Harper & Comer's attached was a news article about the company's latest milestone, a prestigious award for corporate responsibility. The message was simple. Thought you'd want to see this. Claire stared at the screen, her chest tightening with emotion. Reading about Harper & Co.'s achievements stirred up a mix of pride and sorrow. Pride because she knew she'd once been part of something special. Sorrow because she'd played a role in nearly tearing it all down. For a moment, she considered replying to the email, thanking the sender for thinking of her. But instead, she closed her laptop and sat quietly, letting the weight of it sink in.